In the 5+ years that I've been baking with sourdough, I've learned a few tricks that can help make your life easier and save on ingredients. I was fortunate enough to learn 1 or 2 of these tips at the start of my sourdough journey, but I wish I would have known all of these from the beginning. Let's dive in. My first tip is to use a rubber band to mark the height of your sourdough starter. This gives you a great visual indication of how much your starter has risen, and it's so easy to adjust the height. I've also seen some people use a marker to mark the height, which is another great option, but I personally prefer the rubber band. My next tip is to store your discard in a jar in the refrigerator. You can pour whatever discard you might have from feeding into the jar, and then when you have enough, you can use it to make waffles or pancakes. Just make sure to label your jar, or you might get confused and use your discard instead of your active starter. Okay, this is a tip that will save you some flour. When you're first getting your starter going from scratch, there's no need to make a giant starter. Instead, you can make a mini starter by only feeding it 30 grams each of flour and water. You don't need anything bigger. And this next tip can also save you quite a bit of flour. So once your starter is well established, or at least 2 weeks old, you can start storing it in the refrigerator for up to a week at a time. Then you can just pull it out once a week, feed it, and either bake with it or stick it back in the fridge. This way you don't have to feed it and bake with it every day. Now, you only want to do this if your starter is showing signs of strength. So wait until it's regularly doubling every 4 to 12 hours and can consistently raise a loaf of bread. My last tip is to perform the float test to see if your starter is ready to be baked with. Drop a small amount of starter in a glass of room temperature water. If it floats, it's ready to be baked with. If it sinks, it's an indication that it either hasn't risen enough or it has over-fermented and lost some of its strength. It doesn't necessarily mean that it won't raise a loaf of bread, but it won't be at its peak fermentation or the ideal window for making amazing bread. Once you've baked with sourdough starter for a while, you won't need to perform the float test. You'll start to get a good feel for when your starter is ready to go. But this is a great way for beginners to learn the signs of an active starter. All right, if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and make sure to check out my sourdough playlist for all sorts of sourdough goodness. Just make sure to label your jar. It's an indication that it's either, you won't need to perform the float. Check out my sourdough playlist for more,